Youth unemployment is the unemployment of young people, defined by the United Nations as 14 to 28 years old. An unemployed person is defined as someone who does not have a job but is actively seeking work. In order to qualify as unemployed for official and statistical measurement, the individual must be without employment, willing and able to work, of the officially designated working age, and actively searching for a position. Youth unemployment rates are historically 4 to 5 times more than the adult rates in every country in the world. In 2012, youth made up to 40% of the world unemployed, with a global youth unemployment rate of 12.6%. Close to 75 million youth were unemployed worldwide. In November 2011, the number of unemployed youth in the United Kingdom exceeded 1 million for the first time in the past 19 years. In Spain, youth unemployment has doubled since 2008 and now stands at 46%. In the OECD as a whole, 15 million young people are unemployed, representing around $300 billion in lost wages alone, over a full year. Background: there are 1.2 billion youth in the world aged between 15 and 24, accounting for 17% of the world's population. 87% of them live in developing countries. The age range defined by the United Nations addresses the period when mandatory schooling ends until the age of 24. This definition remains controversial as it not only impacts unemployment statistics but also plays an important role in the targeted solutions designed by policymakers in the world. Two main debates are ongoing today. First, defining the age range of youth is not as obvious as it seems. Two theoretical perspectives have dominated this debate. Youth can be seen as a stage in life between adolescence and adulthood, or as a socially constructed group with its own subculture, making it difficult to establish a comparable age range between countries. Second, the definition of unemployment itself leads to the possibility of not accounting for a number of young people left out of work. Those who do not have a job and are not actively seeking work, oftentimes women, are considered inactive and are therefore excluded in unemployment statistics. Their inclusion would substantially increase the unemployment rate. Causes: there are multiple and complex causes behind youth unemployment. Among them, the quality and relevance of education, inflexible labor market and regulations, which in turn create a situation of assistance and dependency, are the main causes discussed today. From education to employment. The skills crisis. The quality and relevance of education is often considered as the first root cause of youth unemployment. In 2010, in 25 out of 27 developed countries, the highest unemployment rate was among people with primary education or less. Yet, high education does not guarantee a decent job. For example, in Tunisia, 40% of university graduates are unemployed against 24% of non-graduates. This affects highly educated young females in particular. In Turkey, the unemployment rate among university-educated women is more than 3 times higher than that of university-educated men. In Iran and the United Arab Emirates, it is nearly 3 times, and in Saudi Arabia, it is 8 times. Beyond the necessity to ensure its access to all, education is not adequately tailored to the needs of the labor market, which in turn leads to 2 consequences: the inability for young people to find jobs, and the inability for employers to hire the skills they need. Combined with the economic crisis and the lack of sufficient job creation in many countries, it has resulted in higher unemployment rates around the world and the development of a skills crisis. Surveys suggest that up to half of all businesses have open positions for which they are struggling to find suitably qualified people. One global survey found that more than 55% of employers worldwide believe there is a skill crisis, as businesses witness a growing mismatch between the skills students learn in the education system and those required in the workplace. For many governments, A key question is how they can bridge this gap and ensure that young people are equipped with the skills employers are looking for. Labor markets and regulations. Labor market policies and institutions play a critical role in promoting labor demand and supporting transition from education to work. First, a high level of employment protection regulations has had a negative effect on youth workers, as these regulations make it harder for employers to fire them during a downturn. Second, the development of temporary forms of work such as internships, seasonal jobs and short-term contracts have left young workers in precarious situations. Because their jobs are temporary contracts, youth are often the first to be laid off when a company downsizes. If they're laid off, youth are typically not eligible for redundancy payments because they only worked with the company for a short period of time. Once this work ends, many find themselves unemployed and disadvantaged in the job search. However, some youth are entering work on a part-time basis during tertiary education. This rate is low in countries like Italy, Spain and France, but in the United States almost one-third of students combine education and work. Facing unemployment, young people also turn to unpaid work. The legitimacy of internships has begun to be questioned. The intent of an internship is to provide valuable work experience, typically to youth in or recently out of college. However, many interns have complained that they are simply performing basic grunt work, rather than learning important knowledge and skills. Whether or not these internship positions are now violating the federal rules that are in place to govern programs such as internships remains to be seen. The internship, however, seems to be the only viable alternative to job placement for the young individual, with little to no job growth occurring. The unemployment rate among those fresh out of college and at the later end of the 15 to 24 aged youth spectrum is approximately 13.2% as of April 2012. Assistance and dependency. Many countries around the world provide income assistance to support unemployed youth until labor market and economic conditions improve. Although this support is strictly related to obligations in terms of active job search and training, it has led to an emerging debate on whether or not it creates dependency among the youth and has a detrimental effect on them. In September 2014, David Cameron announced that he would cut housing and employment benefits for 18 to 21-year-olds by £3,000 to £23,000 to reduce dependency on government assistance and redirect funding to targeted programs for increased learning and training opportunities. Case studies. The individual experiences of youth unemployment vary from country to country. Definitions of youth can also vary from country to country, so examination of particular countries gives a greater insight into the causes and consequences of youth unemployment. African countries define youth as someone from as young as 15 to someone well into their mid-30s, which varies from the standardized definition of the United Nations. Africa has the youngest population of any continent, which means that the problem of youth unemployment there is particularly relevant. Approximately 200 million people in Africa are between the ages of 15 and 24. This number is expected to double in size in the next 30 years. Between 2001 and 2010, countries in Africa reported some of the world's fastest-growing economies. In Africa, the message the youth are receiving from schools and adults is to become job creators rather than job seekers, which encourages them to become entrepreneurs. Canada's economy has braved the global recession better than many others. But last year, 14.3% of Canadian youth were unemployed, up from 11.2% in 2007 and double the current national jobless rate of 7.2%, according to Statistics Canada. That amounts to the biggest gap between youth and adult unemployment rates since 1977. The average post-secondary graduate carries $28,000 in student debt. The unemployment rate for Canadian young people is about double that of the rest of the population. Only youth who collect unemployment insurance or welfare are recorded in Canada's unemployment statistics. In Canada's largest province, Ontario, joblessness rates are the highest. The rate of unemployment for Ontarians between the ages of 15 to 24 is hovering between 16 and 17%. Double that of the normal provincial rate and higher than the national youth unemployment rate at 13.5–14.5%. The percentage of youth in Ontario who actually have a job hasn't climbed above 52% this year. Toronto's youth unemployment rate is at 18%, but only 43% of the area's youth are employed, the lowest rate in the province. European Union. Due to the Great Recession in Europe, in 2009, only 15% of males and 10% of females between ages 16 to 19 were employed full-time. The youth employment rate in the European Union reached an all-time low of 32.9% in the first half of 2011. Of the countries in the European Union, Germany sticks out with its low rate of 7.9%. Some critics argue that the decrease of the youth unemployment began even before the economic downturn. Countries such as Greece and Spain. The United Kingdom has experienced increased youth unemployment in the past few years, with rates reaching over 20% in 2009. The term NEET originated here, meaning youth that are not in education, employment or training. India. The youth unemployment rate was around 10% in 2005, but they haven't reliably reported statistics to the United Nations over the years. However, there has been an increase in young adults remaining in school and getting additional degrees simply because there aren't opportunities for employment. These youth are typically of a lower class, but it can represent a wide variety of individuals across races and classes. They call the phenomenon time pass because the youth are simply passing time in college while waiting for a paid employment opportunity. In India, the employment system is reliant on connections or government opportunities. Jordan. There are 15 million unemployed young men in Arab communities. The youth unemployment rate in Jordan has traditionally been much higher than other countries. In the past 10 years, the rate has stayed around 23%. There has been a recent increase in the popular belief that unemployment is the fault of the individual and not a societal problem. However, youth unemployment has also been attributed to increased pressure on service sectors that typically employ more youth in Jordan. Youth unemployment has led to later and later ages of marriage in Jordan, which some view as one of the most important consequences of the phenomenon. Another consequence experienced in Jordan is increased mental health problems. Russia. Youth unemployment in Russia was over 18% in 2010. However, there was a wide variance in levels of unemployment in Russia just a few years earlier, that continued through the 2008 economic crisis. In 2005, the area around Moscow had an unemployment rate of just 1%, while the Dagestan region had a rate over 22%. This may be partially attributed to the differences in levels of development in the region. It has been found that the higher the level of development in a region, the lower the level of both overall and youth-specific unemployment. In Russia, the main cause of youth unemployment has been attributed to lower levels of human capital. United States. The general unemployment rate in the United States has increased in the last 5 years, but the youth unemployment rate has jumped almost 10 percentage points. In 2007, before the most recent recession began, youth unemployment was already at 13%. By 2008, this rate had jumped to 18% and in 2010 it had climbed to just under 21%. The length of time the youth are unemployed has expanded as well, with many youth in the United States remaining unemployed after more than a year of searching for a job. This has caused the creation of a scar generation, as discussed below. Consequences. A lost generation. Unemployed youth has been called a lost generation. not only because of productivity loss but also because of the long-term direct and indirect impact unemployment has on young people and their families. Unemployment has been said to affect earnings for about 20 years. Because they aren't able to build up skills or experience during their first years in the workforce. Unemployed youth see a decrease in lifetime earnings when compared to those who had steady work or those who were unemployed as an adult. A lower salary can persist for 20 years following the unemployed period before the individual begins earning competitively to their peers. Widespread youth unemployment also leads to a socially excluded generation at great risk for poverty. For example, Spain saw an 18% increase in income inequality. The lost generation effect impacts also their families. Youth in many countries now live with their parents into their late 20s. This contributes to what is called the full nest syndrome. In 2008, 46% of 18 to 34-year-olds in the European Union lived with at least one parent. In most countries, the stay-at-homes were more likely to be unemployed than those who had moved out. In families, it is common that when one person becomes unemployed, other members of the family begin looking for or securing employment. This is called the added worker effect. This can sometimes take the form of employment in the informal sector when necessary. Alongside the shift in youth living situations, the impact of returning to live with parents as well as difficulty finding a fulfilling job lead to mental health risks. Being unemployed for a long period of time in youth has been correlated to decreased happiness, job satisfaction and other mental health issues. Unemployed youth also report more isolation from their community. Youth who are neither working nor studying do not have the opportunity to learn and improve their skills. They are progressively marginalized from the labor market and in turn can develop an antisocial behavior. Political unrest and increased public spending. The rise of political unrest and antisocial behavior in the world has been recently attributed to youth unemployment. During the course of 2011, it became a key factor in fueling protests around the globe. Within 12 months, 4 regimes in the Arab world fell in the wake of the protests led by young people. Riots and protests similarly engulfed a number of European and North American cities. The lack of productive engagement of young people in wider society, underlined by high levels of unemployment and underemployment, only serves to add to this feeling of disenfranchisement. Youth unemployment also dramatically increases public spending at times when economies are struggling to remain competitive and social benefits increase along with an aging population. Youth unemployment has direct costs such as increased benefit payments, lost income tax revenues and wasted capacity. In Britain, a report by the London School of Economics, the Royal Bank of Scotland and the Prince's Trust puts the cost of the country's 744,000 unemployed youngsters at £155 million a week in benefits and lost productivity. Similarly, the economic loss from youth unemployment in Europe is estimated at €153 billion or 1.2% of GDP in 2011. Youth unemployment has indirect costs too, including emigration. Young people leave their countries in hope to find employment elsewhere. This brain drain has contributed to deteriorating countries' competitiveness, especially in Europe. A lack of innovation. The economic crisis has led to a global decrease in competitiveness. There is a risk of loss of talent and skills since a great amount of university graduates are unable to find a job and to put their knowledge and capabilities into producing innovation and contributing to economic growth. Excluding young people from the labor market means lacking the divergent thinking, creativity and innovation that they naturally offer. This fresh thinking is necessary for employers to foster new designs and innovative ideas. Fighting youth unemployment is therefore key to maintaining the economic performance of a country.